Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I want to share with you how the Shalom Catholic community started. In the summer of 1980, Pope John Paul II, who was Pope at that time, made his first visit as Pope to Brazil, and that included a city in the northeast of Brazil called Fortaleza. I had never heard of this city before I met the Shalom community, but it's where the community was founded, it's where our mother house is today, and it's a beautiful city. I got to go there last summer, and I highly recommend going if you ever have the chance. So the Bishop of Fortaleza asked two young people in his city to present a gift to John Paul II during Mass on behalf of all the young people from that city. One of those people was named Moises, which is like Moses, but in a Brazilian way. He was someone who was involved in a lot of the prayer groups, the young adult groups, the charismatic renewal in the church there. And he had had a deep experience, a personal experience with God through that. And he had a deep desire to live the gospel radically and to reach other people in his city with the peace and the joy of God that he had found. So he was this 20-year-old guy. The bishop came to him, wanted him to give something to the Pope, and he thought, what can I possibly give to the Pope? And I think about that sometimes, like if Pope Francis was gonna come and visit Boston, and the bishop came to me and said, Danielle, we want you to give something to Pope Francis on behalf of all the young people of the city. Like, what would you possibly give to the Pope? But his response was so beautiful. He prayed about it and he wrote this letter saying that he wanted to offer his life, his youth, everything that he had on behalf of the church and all mankind, all young people, and especially those who were the most far from God and from the church. So that was on July 9th, 1980, the day that he offered this letter to Pope John Paul II. And we say that the community was born at John Paul II's feet that day. But it's interesting because Moises didn't plan to start a community. He was really attracted to community life, but he didn't think like, I'm gonna found a new community. But he was so restless to evangelize. It was something that kept him up at night. Like, how can I reach the young people in my city who don't know God's love? So one idea that he had was to open a cafe, and he was thinking like, okay, people who maybe wouldn't come to a retreat or to Mass because they wouldn't be able to appreciate it if they don't understand what's going on, like they would come to a cafe and have a coffee or a sandwich with their friends. And he was kind of embarrassed to share about it, like this kind of crazy idea, but he was at a birthday party one night and his friends like caught him deep in thought and said like, what are you thinking about? And he shared with them like, I have this idea, I think it's inspired from God, I want to start a cafe to evangelize. And people started getting really excited about it and they wanted to be part of it. So exactly 2 years after he gave his letter to John Paul II, on July 9th, 1982, the first Shalom Cafe opened. And the cafe was staffed by people from the prayer groups, Moises' friends, people who were just as excited to evangelize as he was. So people who were coming into the cafe, the waiter or waitress would look for an opportunity to talk to them about how God had changed their life. And a lot of the time, the person who had come in would ask to be prayed over. So this cafe attracted a lot of people. It was the only like cafe, and there was also a bookstore. It was the only one in that city. So people were excited to go there. It was a place for people to meet up with each other. They had masses there on Sundays. And now this is one of the ways that we still to this day evangelize. So our missions all over the world have a Shalom Center of Evangelization, we call it. So some of them are a cafe or a bookstore. Maybe sometime I'll make a video showing you like a tour of our Center of Evangelization here in Boston. So the people that were coming to the cafe wanted to participate more, and they started to create more prayer groups. They wanted to serve there, they were inviting their friends, and it was just growing. And some of them had this desire to commit themselves entirely, like to live a community life, to live the gospel radically. And Moises had been studying about the history of community life in the Catholic Church. He visited some communities, but his desire was just to do God's will. And God was making it clear that he wanted to start a new community with this group of young people. So some of them actually spent their summer break for 1 month living in community together. So they would do community prayer every day, personal prayer, and then they would work in the cafe, serving, cleaning, and then evangelizing and serving in the prayer groups. And Moises really wanted to have this intense contemplative life and this intense active life united in the way that they lived. So God really started to confirm that this was the way that he was asking them to live. And in 1985, they had their first Mass. It was Moises and 4 other young people. and they consecrated themselves as missionaries in the church, living as Shalom. More people wanted to be consecrated, wanted to offer their lives to, and bishops started asking for Shalom houses to be open in their diocese. And in the midst of all of this, Moises was writing the rules for the community. So Amir was involved, and she's the community's co-founder, and she had met Moises back as part of the charismatic groups, and she was one of the first ones to be consecrated in the Shalom community in the following year. So Moises finished writing the rules for our community, which are our statutes, and the community was growing and growing. The charism had spread to other countries. And then in 2007, we were recognized as an international private association of the faithful by the Holy See and the Pontifical Council for the Laity. In 2012, we received definitive approval of our statutes, and with that, it was kind of like the church's stamp of approval for us, saying that the Shalom community is a way to holiness in the Catholic Church. And now, today, the Shalom community is present in 34 countries. We have over 10,000 missionaries who are consecrated members of the community. And it's made up of people who had this same desire as Moises did to offer their lives, to evangelize, to live the gospel radically, and who were inspired to follow him. And I'm one of those people. And it's amazing to me how this 20-year-old Brazilian guy wrote a letter to John Paul II in 1980, and how through this letter and through his life, the Shalom Charism was born. And now, almost 40 years later, in a different part of the world, in a different country, a different culture, a different language, I read those same words, and I remember the first time that I read that, and my heart was like burning inside of me, because I felt like that expressed in words the desire that I had to offer myself. So that's how it all got started, and I'm gonna put a link below if you wanna read more about the history of the community. And also we put the letter that Moises wrote to music, so it's a Shalom song now, so I'll put the link for that music video as well. Thank you guys so much. See you soon. Shalom.